Hello everyone, I am Sarah Hanina Nadra, and today I would like to present our final project under the subject Variety of English Language, Navigating the Second Diaspora, an analysis of the spread, status, and features of English in Kuwait and China. So basically, the overview of our project is we provide a comparative sociolinguistic analysis of two individuals, Anwar from Kuwait and Jami from China, to explore the spread, status, and features of English within Culture's expanding circle. We focus on five distinct aspects of their lives: childhood socialization, media influence, identity formation, phonological nuances, and academic adaptation. Here is my group members. I am Sarah Hanina, and there will be Siti Aisha, Zara Anisa, and Rin Batisha also working on this project. So for aspect number one, we focus on the background information of our interviewee. Firstly, we interviewed Anwar. He is from Kuwait and he is Arabic. Currently, he is studying business at Nottingham University in Sydney. And then we interviewed Go Jiami. She is originally from China and she is Chinese. Currently, she is studying art at Nanyang University, Singapore. So, for introduction, we are exploring how English isn't just a language for native speakers anymore, but it is actually a global phenomenon. We are looking at this through the lens of Braj Kastru's three-circle model, specifically focusing on the expanding circle. The expanding circle, it's different. Unlike the inner circle of native speakers or the outer circle of former colonies like Malaysia, the expanding circle represents nations like China and Kuwait. Here, English is learned as a foreign language for trade, education, and global communication. As the sociolinguistic profile of English shifts, it also has become an institutionalized lingua franca used all over the world. First, let's dive into the history and development of English in Kuwait. So, the history of English here is actually very fascinating because it started purely as a utilitarian tool back in 1775 for railroads. And then in 1921, Ahmadiyya School made English a compulsory subject to support modernization. And then between 1962 and 1990, English became the primary lingua franca for Kuwait's large expatriate workforce and the medium for scientific higher education. Even times during political resistance, the economic necessity of English never faded. Later, the trauma of Iraqi invasion in 1990 acted as a catalyst, realigned Kuwaiti identity, moving English from the professional sphere into the very heart of domestic and social life. This also sparks a boom in private English medium school. Now, let's look at China. English history, there is a roller coaster of trade contact, political bans, and massive expansion. The first contact started in 1637 during a trade in Guangzhou, later development of Chinese Pidgin English after the 1842 Treaty of Nanjing. Then, in 19th century, English was introduced through missionary schools. Reformers viewed English as a tool for modernization and global engagement. Then comes post 1949, which is Russian replaced English, and during the Cultural Revolution, English was restricted. Everything changed with the reform and opening up era. English became a strategic tool for national development, eventually becoming a core subject alongside Chinese and math. And by the 90s, an English craze took over, fueled by the media and also the high stakes of the Gaokao exam. Can you tell me a little bit about your childhood growing up?
And seeing lots of different backgrounds of people, different people and different cultures. They come from all parts of the world, and interacting with them, picking up a little bit on different languages. It was very interesting.
Next, we're going to cover for aspect number two, which is childhood socialization and mobility. Anwar's childhood in the Middle East, Kuwait and Qatar, serves as a primary example of how English dispersal happened within the expanding circle. According to Kashu, speakers in this circle use English as a tool for international communication, often in highly globalized environment. So his answer, when we asked during the interview, is evident when Anwar recalls his childhood as being full with experiences in parks where he interacted with people from all parts of the world. This highlights his experience shaped by diversity rather than a monoculture environment. A monoculture environment is one where the individuals are exposed to only one cultural pattern and one linguistic system from birth. view, he also notes that they come from all parts of the world and interacting with them, picking up a little bit on different language, demonstrates how in the multicultural landscape of Kuwait and Qatar, English typically acts as a middle ground that bridges this diverse background. English is not simply a language of identity, but rather it's being used as a tool for coordination. And what makes this interesting is that a lingua franca environment does not eliminate multilingualism, but it became quite the contrary. His experience of picking up a little bit on different languages suggests incidental multilingual exposure, and this is what the scholars often call English as a lingua franca. Can you tell me a little bit about your childhood growing up?
Okay, so I grew up in Xi'an, and then I was the only child of my parents. Uh, and then they got divorced when I was 10. So my mom brought me out, out from Xi'an. We moved to Zhuhai, which is another city in China. And then we lived there for 1 year. And then I moved to Malaysia. And I stayed there for like 7 years. And then now I'm studying in Singapore.
We can see through Jemmy's answer that her experience is quite different because unlike Anwar's multicultural exposure, Jemmy's English developed through educational and geographical migration. Her journey from Xi'an to Zhuhai and eventually to Malaysia and Singapore highlights the role of English as a migratory tool within the expanding circle. Jemmy's geographical trajectory is a significant factor in her English language development, as each move, each relocation marked a shift in linguistic ecology. Her upbringing in Xi'an placed her in a primarily Mandarin dominant environment characterized by the monocultural linguistic norms of central China. Her subsequent move to Zhuhai, an economically globalized hub, facilitated an initial bridge toward global networks. However, her migration to Malaysia and Singapore marked a transition into a highly multilingual societies where English maintains a strong institutional and academic presence. Thus, when Jiami moved outward geographically, English shifted from a secondary foreign language to a central tool for her education and social identity. While both Anwar and Jami are situated within the expanding circle, their English language development illustrates two distinct pathways of English dispersal within the expanding circle, one driven by a stable multicultural social hub, and the other by a series of geographical and educational mobility. The primary difference lies in the linguistic ecology. Linguistic ecology is the study of language in relation to one another and to various social factors. In this case, how Anwar and Jami social physical environment affected their usage of English. This branch of linguistics was pioneered by Professor Einar Haugen in his book The Ecology of Language. Haugen defined language ecology as the study of interactions between any given languages and its environment. It responds to social structures, migration, patterns, institutional systems, and everyday interactional spaces. In this table, we can see the difference between Anwar and Jami's experience growing up using English. And Anwar's childhood in Kuwait and Qatar was actually characterized by static multiculturalism. He recalls socializing in public parks where he interacted with people from different parts of the world. So his geography remained relatively stable, but the social composition was highly diverse. Public parks, shared neighborhoods, and everyday communal spaces function as microcosms of global diversity. In this context, English served as a social bridge and became a tool he picked up organically to communicate with a diverse range of peers in single location. English functioned as a social bridge and not imposed institutionally. In contrast to Jami, her childhood was defined by geographical movement. She transitioned from a Mandarin dominant speaking environment in Xi'an to Zhuhai and eventually to highly multilingual landscapes of Malaysia and Singapore. And unlike Anwar's stable multicultural hub, Jami's environment shifted repeatedly as she transitioned across different educational systems and national contexts. English is a necessity for survival and academic success as she moved across borders. The contrast between these two cases illustrates how English spreads within the expanding circle through different ecological conditions. Ultimately, this comparison demonstrates that English dispersal in the expanding circle cannot be explained solely through institutional policy or colonial legacy. Instead, it must be viewed and understood ecologically, shaped by the dynamic interaction between social diversity, geographical mobility, and a communicative necessity. What's your favorite cartoon when you were a kid?
I would have to say The Amazing World of Gumball. The Amazing World of Gumball was, I'd say, amazing. We didn't have the latest episodes on our um, TVs. They would air maybe a few months later. So sometimes I would go onto my laptop and try to Google what's the latest episode and what happened in it. And then I would wait for it to come on our TV. The Middle Eastern broadcasting was different. It would first air in the US and in the Europe, and after that it would come to the Middle East. And I watched it in English and in Arabic both. It was a very, very good show.
Building on the ecological view of English dispersal, Anwar's history with media illustrates how media is used as a catalyst for English and operates within the expanding circle. His favorite childhood cartoon, The Amazing World of Gumball, serves as a primary example of how globalized media creates an individual status for English that is independent of school or government policy. We can first observe through Anwar's answer that the Middle Eastern broadcasting schedule was different from Western schedules, often airing episodes months later than the US or Europe. English language content often originates in inner circle context and diffuses outward. Local broadcasting delays create a gap between production and production access. So instead of waiting, Anwar used his laptop to Google what's the latest episode in English, and this action is sociolinguistically significant. It reflects his awareness of English in the primary source of language of global content and recognition that timely information is more accessible in English. He also mentioned that he consumed the content in both English and Arabic. Now, this is very revealing because this dual engagement indicates additive bilingualism rather than language replacement. English did not displace Arabic, instead, it coexisted within his identity as a leisure language. He describes the experience as very, very good, which signals emotional association. This matters because languages linked to pleasure often integrate more deeply to identity. Language is deeply intertwined with memory and emotion. And for Anwar, English is not just a series of grammatical rules learned in classroom, but it is tied with vivid memories of his childhood, his cousins, and his favorite media. Is what is your favorite cartoon when you were a kid?
My favorite cartoon was My Little Pony. Not there's no like specific reason. It was just like my mom gave me that to watch, and then I just watched it. Yes.
She mentions that her favorite cartoon is My Little Pony, introduced by her mother, but it is not within personal choice. Unlike Anwar's self-driven exposure, Jami's English entered through family curation. She explains that there was no specific reason for choosing it. And this detail is significant because in many expanding circle contexts, English does not enter the home organically. It is often strategically introduced by parents who perceive English as a form of cultural capital, and in this sense, Jemi's mother functioned by deliberately curating her daughter's English exposure. She also mentioned that she just watched it without clear motivation. On the surface, this might seem passive. However, from a linguistic perspective, it is deeply formative. Several studies that have been conducted previously shows that relationship between the first language and second language obtained through English cartoons affect many aspects of a child language development. And this can actually build phonological familiarity and implicit vocabulary. Although both Anwar and Jami encountered English through childhood media within the expanding circle, the mechanism of exposure, the source of motivation, and the ecological dynamics differs significantly. We can see that Anwar's engagement with English was self initiated and digitally driven. When faced with the late Middle Eastern broadcasting schedules, he actively sought out the latest episodes in English, and his decision to Google the latest episode shows digital agency. He recognized English as the primary language of global content circulation and used it strategically. In contrast to Jamie's exposure, which was parentingly curated, she did not choose My Little Pony out of personal curiosity. It was introduced by her mother. So this highlights the agency originates from the family, not the child. We can also see that with Anwar's dual engagement by watching in Arabic and English, it indicates additive bilingualism. Learners who have gone through the process of learning a second language are also more experienced language learners, and it's likely that they develop certain skills and strategies for achieving the language learning task. He was an active participant while watching The Amazing World of Gumball and forms an emotional association. For him, English becomes a leisure language deeply tied to vivid memories. In contrast, Jamie just watched it without a specific motivation, representing a more passive but deeply formative experience. This repeated exposure in her Mandarin dominant environment in Xi'an allowed English to be normalized as a background sound rather than academic pressure. By the time she moved to international settings, English was no longer foreign to her. Ultimately, these two cases illustrated that the spread of English in the expanding circle is not a uniform process, but one that adapts to the learner's specific environment. Whether English is being used by the individuals to satisfy global curiosity or is being strategically introduced by the family as a form of investment in future mobility, both methods effectively transform English from foreign language to an integrated part of the speaker's lived experience.
Moving on to my section, I will be presenting on aspect number 2, which examines identity formation through two contrasting perspectives, philosophical continuity and experiential realism. By comparing Anwar and Jiami, this section shows how childhood shapes identity differently depending on environmental stability and mobility. Both respondents agree that childhood plays an important role in shaping who they become. However, the way they explain this influence is very different.
Do you think childhood plays an important role in shaping a person's life?
I think childhood does play an important role in shaping a person's life because it leads you to having experiences, and those experiences combine together to make you the person you are. They create you as your identity, the way you talk with people, the way you look at things, and how you become overall as a person, individual, when you grow up.
Anwar sees identity as something that develops gradually over time through accumulated experience. In contrast, Jiami connects her identity to a specific pivotal event that changed her outlook.
Do you think childhood plays an important role in shaping a person's life? Why or why not?
Yes, I think it's important because use me as an example, because my parents got divorced, so I don't really trust like promises in a relationship or loyalty in a relationship, so that did like play an important role in my life.
This contrast forms the core of analysis. Arnold's perspective reflects philosophical continuity. He explains that childhood experiences combine together to shape communication style, worldview, and personality. He does not focus on one defining moment. Instead, identity develops gradually through layered experiences. This suggests environmental stability, where identity forms through coherence and long-term growth rather than disruption. In contrast, Jiami's understanding of identity reflects experiential realism. She directly connects her childhood to a specific event, her parents' divorce, and explains how it shaped her perception of trust and loyalty in relationships. Her explanation is causal and event-driven. Instead of describing identity as gradual accumulation, she frames it as shaped by a decisive lived rupture. Additionally, her experience of geographical mobility reinforces instability. This means her identity formation involves adaptation and recalibration rather than continuity. Her worldview emerges from responding to change rather than growing within stability. When we compare both respondents directly, three key differences emerge. First, structurally. Anwar's narrative is integrative while Giami's is episodic. Anwar synthesizes multiple experiences into a coherent philosophy of growth, whereas Giami isolates a defining event that reshaped her perspective. Second, ecologically. Anwar's stable environment allows gradual identity development, while Giami's mobility requires resilience and adaptation. Third, their models of identity differ fundamentally. One reflects continuity and coherence, while the other reflects realism shaped by disruption. This demonstrates that identity formation is deeply influenced by environmental conditions rather than childhood alone. Beyond experience and environment, language also plays a role in identity formation. For Anwar, English appears integrated into his reflective thinking. It functions as a medium for philosophical self-expression. For Giami, however, English seems more instrumental, a tool for navigating different social and geographical contexts. This difference shows that language does not shape identity uniformly. Instead, its role depends on ecological conditions and lived experience. In conclusion, this comparative analysis shows that identity formation is shaped not only by childhood experiences, but by how individuals interpret those experiences within their environments. Stability encourages synthesis and narrative continuity, rupture and mobility foreground adaptation and experiential realism. Therefore, identity is not simply a product of exposure or upbringing, but of ecological context, relational history, and personal interpretations. Anwar reflects philosophical continuity grounded in stability, while Giami reflects experiential realism grounded in mobility.
In this section of our report, which is aspect number 3, I will discuss phonological nuance and speech patterns observed in our interview participants. The speakers we analyze are Anwar from Kuwait, representing Arabic influence English, and Jami from China, representing Mandarin influence English. Our focus is on how their first language influenced their English pronunciation, rhythm, and speech patterns. First, it is important to understand what phonology means. Phonology refers to the sound system of a language, including elements such as stress patterns, rhythm, intonation, and the pronunciation of vowels and consonants. According to cultural models of world Englishes, the speakers in the expanding circle often learn English as a foreign language. Because of this, their English pronunciation is frequently influenced by their first language or L1. This influence creates distinct accents and speech patterns which reflects the speaker's linguistic background.
Openability, being straight with each other, being honest, and saying the truth to each other. You know, we shake hands and we find the solution to the problem together.
Looking first at Anwar, we can observe several phonological features influenced by Arabic speech patterns. One noticeable feature is lexical repetition for emphasis. For example, Anwar says very bad and also repeats phrases like we, let it out. Although this may appear like hesitation, research suggests that repetition is common in Arabic rhetorical style and is often used to emphasize emotion or importance. Another feature is clear articulation of vowels, which reflects the syllable clarity found in Arabic phonology.
We spoke about it and found an issue, and alhamdulillah, he didn't have any problems with that. They they got the insurance involved.
Anwar also used the phrases like Alhamdulillah, which is an Arabic expression. This shows code switching where speakers mix elements of their first language with English. Next, we examine Jiami, whose speech shows features influenced by Mandarin Chinese. One important feature is syllable time rhythm. In Mandarin, each syllable tends to have similar duration, unlike English, which is stress time.
If this friendship is can hold a longer time, then I will value more.
For example, in the sentence, if this friendship can hold a longer time, then I will value more. These syllables are pronounced with relatively equal stress, creating a steady rhythm. Another feature is final consonant weakening. Mandarin syllables rarely ends with consonants like P or T, so speakers may soften these sounds when speaking English. Additionally, Mandarin speakers may produce different R sounds, sometimes slightly rolled or retroflex.
We still contact each other even.
When we compare both speakers, we can see different types of phonological transfer. For Anwar, the features mainly involve discourse and emphasis, such as repetition and expressive pronunciation influenced by Arabic communication style. For Jami, the features are most structural, including syllable timing and consonant reduction, which come from difference between Mandarin and English phonological systems. Despite this difference, both speakers remain fully understandable, showing that English can function effectively as a global lingua franca. In conclusion, phonological variation in English reflects the linguistic background of the speaker. Both Anwar and Jami demonstrate how first language influence shapes pronunciation, rhythm, and speech patterns. This variation should not be viewed as error, but rather as natural features of global English usage. This highlights how English continues to evolve as an international language influenced by many cultures and linguistic systems.
The sections look at academic adaptation in the IGCSE program. In this context, English is more than just a language for communication. It becomes a structured academic system where students are expected to write in specific ways. They must organize arguments clearly, justify their evidence, and respond accordingly to marking criteria. As Ken Highland explains, academic writing is socially governed, so success depends not only on language ability but on understanding how the academic system works.
It was a very simple yet very not simple question. It was list all the numbers in existence. In brackets, minus infinity, comma, infinity. Teacher told me that no, this is correct. And I think that's my most memorable memory. It showed to me that you don't need to be a nerd or a genius to understand something. You can just put your mind outside of the box.
Anwar demonstrates strong conceptual thinking. For example, in a mathematics class, he described number as existing from negative infinity to positive infinity. That shows abstract reasoning and creativity. However, even though he understood lesson in class, he struggled during examinations. This shows a knowledge performance gap. He understood the content but found it difficult to present his idea in the structured format required by the exam.
What subject did you enjoy learn the most and why?
Business studies. And because I've seen my brothers, they run businesses too. So whenever I used to go with them, and not all the time, but sometimes they would tell me something that this has to be done this way, and they do certain things in a certain way.
Anwar also preferred business study because he could connect it to his family's real-life business experience. This made learning easier because he was building on something familiar. In this situation, English was not a barrier. Instead, it became a tool to organize his existing knowledge. Research supports this idea. Students often perform better when academic content connects with life experience.
The last question for this interview is, What is one challenge you faced during your studies and what did you learn from it?
The teacher used to say always the same thing. I understand what happened in the classroom, but on the exam paper, I don't understand what to write. I write something completely different. Another subject I really liked was history, but the issues for me came when writing the answers. So the way I overcame that was by dividing it into different sections, my answer. Instead of answering it directly, I went with evidence A, evidence B, discuss both argument, um, explain, and then I came to conclusion.
To deal with this, Anwar developed his own strategy. He began dividing his answers into clear sections: evidence, explanation, and conclusion. By doing this, he aligned his thinking with the marking scheme. This reflects metacognitive awareness. He didn't just study harder, he studied smarter by analyzing how the exam system expected his answer to be written. His A in history shows that academic success involved understanding the structure of assessment, not just the subject content.
Year 9, my history was really bad. Like, my final year exam score was D. And then I was forced to choose history, but I did manage to actually improve in the 2 years of studying. I improved from D to A star. Final exam, I just keep practicing the past papers and then ask teachers.
In comparison, Jami's academic development followed a different pattern. She was strongly motivated by achievement. However, she initially received a D in history. Her difficulty was evaluative writing, especially explaining causes, presenting balanced arguments, and writing justified conclusion. Unlike Anwar, her challenge was not building structure independently, but become familiar with the required writing pattern. Jami improved through consistent practice. She completed many past papers and actively sought feedback from teachers. Through repetition, she gradually became familiar with the structure and language of exam response. This process reflects procedural development, where practice reduces uncertainty and builds fluency. Her improvement from D to A shows how discipline and repetition can lead to academic mastery.
The subject I enjoy the most is actually art, because in art is mainly independent work. You just paint or draw by yourself, and then if the teacher asks you some question, there's no right or wrong, and so you don't have to give some answers or opinion in front of the public, I mean the class. Every answer I gave is unique.
It is also important to note that Jami enjoyed art. Art gave her a sense of freedom because there was less pressure to produce a correct linguistic answer. For multilingual learners, this kind of psychological comfort can be important. It provided emotional stability while she continued strengthening her academic English. Although both students succeed, their pathways were different. Anwar relied on strategic structuring and analytical adjustment, while Jami relied on repetition and gradual internalization of exam patterns. Together, this experience shows that academic adaptation is not automatic. It requires awareness of institution expectations, emotional resilience, and strategic effort. In the IGCSE context, mastering English means mastering the system in which English operates.
In conclusion, our core finding is this: the way a person speaks and uses English is not just a product of institutional rules, it is an ecological byproduct. It is shaped by the specific condition of the relationship and even the personal ruptures that define a person's life journey. For Anwar, his English is the result of a stable multicultural upbringing in Kuwait and Qatar. Here, English was never just a subject to pass in school. It functioned organically as a social bridge long before it becomes an academic requirement. Now, contrast this with Jami. Her relationship with English is defined by mobility and necessity. Her journey took her from parentally mediated media like My Little Pony in Xi'an to successive relocation across Zhuhai, Malaysia, and Singapore. English entered her life through ecological necessity. Because her environment kept changing, she had to adapt quickly to survive and succeed. In conclusion, our hypothesis was substantiated. While Anwar's English is a product of organic growth and social connection, Jami's English is a product of a rupture and strategic survival. Both are successful speakers, but their styles prove that language is inseparable from the lived experience. English is not a static set of rules, it is a living reflection of the person speaking it.